At 4:52 a.m., the office is a refrigerated aquarium of glass and humming vents. The cleaning crew left a lemon tang in the air, and the espresso from last night tastes metallic and tired. I'm barefoot, standing on the cold polished concrete because shoes make me feel formal and I need to be feral. The bank's wire page blinks. Confirm transfer, /$480 million. One button. One morning. If I push send, I save the company and tie a new kind of knot around my neck. If I don't, well, my name becomes a cautionary podcast. On the corner of the table, a note I wrote to myself after a sleepless flight. You don't need everyone to believe. Just enough. Next to it, the envelope I pulled from my father's old toolbox last week, still sealed in brown paper, still smelling faintly of oil and cedar. He wrote my name on it with his blocky mechanics printing, Caleb. I've moved it from desk to desk for years, like a charm I wasn't brave enough to open. The phone on speaker crackles. Mr. Mercer? The banker says, voice warm, neutral. We'll need verbal confirmation. I press a fingertip to the glass. It leaves a small fog moon that vanishes. Somewhere behind me, the elevator dings and the first engineer of the day, Priya, pads in with her headphones and a hello wave, eyes widening at the number on my screen. She mimes, you sure? I breathe in. I count to 4. I hit confirm. I was a parts kid before I was a numbers guy. My father, Frank, ran a one-bay garage in Ravenna, Ohio, where dust settled on everything like a slow snowfall, and the radio never strayed from classic rock. He had hands like tree roots and shoulders that had forgotten what it meant to relax. My mother, Donna, worked nights at the regional hospital. I remember the smell of hot rubber and pine cleaner, the crack of air guns, the shudder of the insulated garage door. I remember the way my father tapped every new socket against the bench before using it, a small ritual like greeting an old friend. Tools have memories, he'd say. They act better if you show some manners. That was his humor, plain and stubborn. I built things because he refused to throw anything out. I took apart VCRs and radios from the 90s, harvested red LEDs like berries. When the high school offered a robotics club, I signed up even though I didn't know a servo from a soundboard. That's where I met Maya Collins, who could solder a wire so clean the joint looked like a silver raindrop. You're breathing too fast, she told me on day 1, leaning close enough that I could smell winter on her jacket. Steady hand, Mr. Mercer. Her voice had this dry cheer in it. She made you want to be the better version of yourself you were always half pretending to be. I went to Ohio State on a half scholarship and a hand-me-down laptop. I wasn't a genius. I was relentless and fine with boredom. While other kids chased internships at shiny offices, I worked night shifts dispatching plumbing calls for a local chain. I learned that people hit their pipes hardest between 11 and 1, after they'd tried and failed to fix things themselves. I learned that if you call the dispatcher by name, he's yours. And I learned that the paper schedule on the wall cost the company real money. Guys forgot jobs, overlapped, burned 20 minutes chasing the wrong address. It took me all summer to build a bare-bones app with a map, a timer, and big idiot-proof buttons. I called it Second Shift. I showed it to my manager, a soft-spoken man named Arturo, whose white shirts were always crisp even at 2 in the morning. He tapped the screen twice, then looked at me. It'll save me headaches, he said. What's it cost? I said a number that made me blush. He nodded. You're charging for aspirin, he said. People pay more for a cure. Second Shift didn't cure anything. It helped. We sold to 3 shops in the first month and 5 by the end of the semester. I thought I was a prodigy until I got a call from an attorney with a voice like starch. The Fair Labor Standards Act, he explained, has fussy rules about on-call time and rounding to 15-minute increments, and my app had quietly pushed an owner into a lawsuit. You aren't in trouble, he said, but you'll shut this down or you'll wish you had. I shut it down. The night I folded the company, Rachel North, who studied architecture and wore pencil behind ear as if born with it, found me sitting in a 24-hour diner with my coat still on. So now you know where the walls are, she said, and put her hand over mine. What are you building next? She said it like a fact, not a question. That's what love felt like at 20, someone calling you forward by your real name. Next was Canary, a small tool that predicted routes for independent contractors in real time, stitched from cheap GPS pucks and an ugly dashboard. I learned then that a single strand of fiber optic, thinner than a human hair, can carry terabits of data if you coax the light just right, a river in a thread. I love that. It felt like a metaphor they wouldn't allow in poems. The invisible thing carrying all the visible world. We ran Canary from a rented living room in Clintonville, 6 folding tables, a printer that squealed, a houseplant that died twice and came back meaner. We sold Canary to a mid-sized software company for just under $2 million. When the wire hit, I checked my account every hour for 3 days, certain someone would email saying there had been a mistake. I bought my parents a new roof and a dishwasher that sang a little electronic song at the end of the cycle. I thought I'd feel different. I didn't. The money was a correction, not a transformation. We'd sold early because I was scared. I knew it even as I signed. I moved to Chicago for the noise. I rented a clean, bright apartment near a Brown Line station where trains rattled past like distant weather. I read shipping reports before bed. Here's a thing you learn when you fall in love with the guts of the world. Almost 90% of global trade moves by sea in metal boxes stacked like Lego. And if a handful of ports sneeze, the rest of us catch the flu weeks later. It's not romantic, but it is beautiful in its own implacable way. A friend from Canary, Marcus Reed, introduced me to a quiet, careful investor named Jared Kim at Forge Capital. Jared wore trim suits and thick socks and never pretended to understand something he didn't. Visibility, he said, tapping a legal pad. Businesses don't panic when they can see. I told him I wanted to build Lattice, a system that would read the heartbeat of trucks, location, temperature, door sensors, from the electronic logging devices the government had mandated in 2017, and up from the trucks, into warehouses, and out to ships. We make the invisible visible. We make the blind spot smaller. He nodded. He wrote a number on the pad. It was enough to start breathing faster. You don't forget the first hire who believes in you. Priya Shah left a bank's data team for our bad shares after asking 3 questions that pried the lid off my plan like a paint can. What's our liability when the map is wrong? What fails with grace? Who gets to override the system and when? She asked them, holding a paper cup of tea, blowing across it, steam fogging her glasses. We rented an old warehouse in Pilsen and built an office inside like a ship's cabin. Windows, long tables, a bell we were never allowed to ring unless a customer said the words, "I'll sign." We rang it 2 months in, after a call with a produce distributor in Fresno. "If you can keep lettuce cold for me," the woman said, "I'll name a child after you." She didn't, but she kept us alive. I promised myself I would never do what my father did. Carry the weight alone until it turned you into the weight. I tried to listen more than I spoke. I hired slower than I wanted. We shipped late on purpose. We made choices that felt like discipline and looked like caution. Then Black Friday came, and half a state went dark. The outage started with a bored contractor rebooting a row of servers to make a fan stop whistling. It continued because our rollback plan was written neatly in a binder and lived in nobody's hands. A fleet of refrigerated trucks in the Midwest blinked offline. The temperature alarms didn't fire because they were muted for testing. Drivers pulled over and texted dispatchers who were at home, standing in kitchens, wearing soft pants, talking to kids. I stood in our server room with my palms flat to the cabinet and the anger inside me like static. That's when I realized anger is just the jacket panic puts on to go outside. Priya leaned in. "Breathe," she said. "We petition. We run dumb. We call." For 12 hours, we were not a platform. We were a room full of people with phones calling other people with phones. I called the lettuce woman in Fresno at 3 a.m. "We've lost visibility," I said. "We'll pay for any spoilage." She was quiet a long beat. "Just tell me cold numbers, Caleb," she said. "Not excuses. I can work with numbers." We survived because truckers know how to survive. They kept their doors shut and their roads simple and parked in the shade of overpasses. We killed a feature the very next day that had seemed like the future and, in the dark, revealed itself as a vanity. I made a video for our customers holding a legal pad with 3 numbered bullet points written in thick marker. "This is what failed. This is what we're doing. This is when you'll see it." I didn't apologize beyond that. I find apologies strange when you're still bleeding. Better to stop the bleeding, then tell the truth. I met Elena Brooks at a bar that was too proud of its ice. She was a photojournalist with a laugh like a skipped stone, light, then a sudden plunk. We talked about fear. She said hers arrived in the morning like a roommate, who wouldn't move out. I said mine preferred elevators. What's the elevator fear? She asked, amused. That the doors open and the floor isn't there, I said. She shook her head. You need sturdier floors. We spent that fall walking the lake after midnight, hands in pockets, breath rising, her camera strap cutting a line across her coat. She came to the office and fell in love with Priya's whiteboard handwriting. It's like a map of a distant city that only she's visited, she said. People like Elena make you feel you're inside a story worth telling. That's a dangerous gift when you're building a company. You start narrating instead of choosing. The year everything got loud. The price of shipping a container from Shanghai to LA multiplied so fast that even the news had to turn its head. We had no hardware business and congratulated ourselves on our lightness until lightness meant being blown around by every gust. A bigger competitor, Apex, began bundling sensors with software and undercutting us. I said no to hardware for months because I was married to the idea that we were pure. Then one evening, I watched a line of trucks idle outside a warehouse, as if stuck in amber, while a forklift inside sat dumb in a pool of light. The door sensor that would have told us the bay was jammed cost $60. I stopped saying no. We had to raise money in a market that had decided to hate my face. I found myself in rooms with tidy men who folded their glasses when they asked questions and unfolded them when they wished to be kind. Remind me, one said, why you have any chance at all when Apex has already eaten your lunch and appears to be licking the plate. I told him we have more empathy than Apex. He blinked. You mean what? I said we call back faster. We own our mistakes louder. We build simpler tools that don't collapse when the world is not behaved. Oh, he said, pleased to find something to notate. So customer service and simplicity. I wanted to say love, but like my chances better with nouns that fit in spreadsheets. Becca Wyatt, our CFO, is the person who talks me into my better math. Becca wears navy sweaters and carries a pencil with no eraser because, she says, we don't erase here, we document and adjust. She built a model that showed me 5 futures, and the version where we acquired a small hardware company in Wisconsin and refactored their sensors to be boring and reliable was the only version where we didn't die. Boring is durable, she said. Sexy breaks. We bought the company. I drove up and shook hands with a man who smelled like wintergreen gum and had been building door switches since before I understood a limit order. The day we closed, I found that brown paper envelope in my backpack again because it followed me like something half-believed. I put it on my desk like a totem and didn't open it because sometimes not knowing is the only thing you still own. Here's a market fact I learned the expensive way. When interest rates fall, cap rates compress, and everyone starts believing tomorrow belongs to the optimistic. When rates rise, whole industries feel like they've moved to a town where the sun sets at 3. We went public in a season when noon still felt like noon. I stood on the balcony of an exchange with a button that rings a bell when you press it, and I pressed it, and everyone clapped, and I thought of my father's big, careful hands tapping a socket before turning it. Blessing the tool. That day my net worth on paper became a number that made my throat tight to say. A year later, I watched it shrink to a number that still made my throat tight, but for different reasons. I learned about the tax code section 1202, the qualified small business stock exclusion, which says if you hold certain stock for 5 years in a C Corp with under $50 million in assets at the time of issuance, you can shelter gains up to $10 million. It felt like a puzzle you solve after you've already paid, a secret door behind the bookshelf. We qualified in this odd, technical way that made me feel both lucky and small. Policy is just another kind of weather you live under. I went back to Ravenna to buy my father's old garage when the landlord listed it to become a nail salon. The floors still carried oil ghosts. The pegboards still remembered where the sockets hung. I ran my hand over the bench and thought, stupidly, about how all my problems were now high, transparent problems, values, narratives, motives, while my father's problems had been the kind you can point at with a dirty finger. The next morning, I met a city planner in a municipal office that smelled like copier toner and coffee. Her badge said Collins, MY. She recognized me, and we did that half-smile people do when the river of years runs between you and you're deciding whether to build a bridge. You kept the steady hand, I said. She knocked her knuckles on the desk. I learned to breathe slower, she said. We signed the paperwork. She shook my hand a little too long, and then let go, and there it was again, The urge to be the version of myself she believed in when I was a kid who breathed too fast. The next thing I decided to build made less sense to the market and more sense to me. I kept thinking about outages and hidden doors and the way a truck becomes a lifeline when wind knocks out a city. I wanted batteries you could trust enough to not talk about them. My head engineer at the new plant, a veteran named Carl who ended every sentence like a question, said lithium iron phosphate, LFP, was good enough for what we needed. Heavy, a bit bulkier, but safe, cheapish, and able to take 3,000 cycles like a prize fighter. We mapped a factory inside an abandoned appliance plant where you could still smell the ghost of hot enamel. Our local papers wrote about jobs. The national outlets wrote about the optics of a billionaire returning home, as if I were a boomerang and not a man with unresolved ideas about sockets and blessings. Running an industrial plant partners you with chaos. The first week a roll-to-roll coder snagged and tried to eat a technician's sleeve. He was fine. He made a joke about the machine needing more fiber. This is how factories survive. Gallows humor, inventory, donuts. We stacked battery modules in steel closets and vibrated them to prove they wouldn't fall apart in a truck that hit a pothole. We invited high school kids to tour and put their palms on the glass that let them stare into the dry room like it was a spaceship. We wrote rules and taped them on doors, and then we rewrote them because someone found the rough edge our tidy minds missed. I walked the line at night with earplugs in and watched the way the machines breathed, hiss, clack, whir, and thought about how truth is a sound before it is a report. Elena took pictures of the plant that made the place look like a cathedral, which is what good photographers do. Teach you to see the holiness you were too practical to bless. We fought that winter because she wanted to go cover a storm season in the Gulf, and I wanted to state my first selfish thing plainly. I don't like you risking your life for art, I said. She's the only person who can make my name hurt or heal just by how she says it. Caleb, she said. Not your call. We solved it poorly. She went. I worried. She sent me a voice memo with rain in the background and a laugh in it, and in the end, storms do what they always do. Take what they take. She came back, thinner, quieter. We were careful with each other in the kitchen like new colleagues. The scandal that came wasn't cinematic. It was a slow drip. A supplier we loved shaving tolerances, a manager in procurement who wanted to be seen as decisive, a test that should have been run twice run once, because it was pretty outside and the weekend was near. We shipped modules that hummed hotter than they ought to in certain truck bays on certain afternoons. No explosions. No smoke. Just the math whispering. This is wrong. I called a recall before the lawyers told me I had to. We took 100,000 modules back and ate the cost like dry bread. The press liked the word embattled. I learned how to read a story and count the journalist's breaths. I held a town hall at the plant and stood under a light that made my neck itch. We will write this on our own board first, I said. We failed. We're fixing. We're not telling ourselves a story we can't survive. I watched Maya in the back, arms folded, eyes steady. After, she caught me in the hall. You look like your father, she said, when he was tired and still had 6 cars left. The night after the recall, I couldn't sleep. The envelope was in the kitchen drawer with the takeout menus. I took it out, breathed the old woodshop smell, and opened it with my thumbnail, slow, careful, the way you slide a photograph from a frame you're not sure you're ready to remember. Inside was a single page torn from a spiral notebook, my father's blocky hand. Things worth losing money for. 1. People who count on you, and you know their names. 2. Doing a thing the right way when the wrong way is easier and no one is watching. 3. Telling the truth when your stomach doesn't want to. 4. Time with your mother when she's laughing. 5. Tools that won't quit before you do. I sat there at the counter and let the air out of my lungs one slow inch at a time. I'd been waiting for a big secret. I got a small one that knew me. When I finally wired the $480 million, months later, at 4:52 a.m., I was sending money from the IPO sprawl and the secondary offerings and the quiet deals to buy our way into being what the company pretended to be. The number looks crass on paper. In the body, it feels like choosing a road. Priya brought in bagels and said, "We'll learn something expensive today." Becca updated a model and said, "We'll survive the lesson if we stay boring." Marcus sent a text that said only, "Proud." I walked the floor and listened to the machines breathe. One of the engineers, a kid named Jonah, I noticed him because he kept his hair clipped to quarter-inch and asked the kind of question you want people to ask when they have access to power tools. Caught me by the coat sleeve near the test bay. He was holding an odd little device he'd built from a spare sensor and a hinge. "You get a minute?" he said. He pressed the hinge open and closed. The readout on his phone showed a small, repeating pattern in the noise. "Door drift," he said, eyes bright. "When bay doors are at rest, they move. Breeze, truck rumble." We could read the not quites and predict jam before jam. He smelled like coffee and laundry soap. I love that smell, a life being tried. I told him to write it up. I told him I'd watch. He grinned. "It'll be boring," he said, delighted. "Promise. If you want a factoid to live in your head and anchor itself, take this one. In the 1850s, there were more miles of plank roads in New York State than canals and rail combined, and in a decade most turned to mush. The world keeps building things that feel cheaper until they rot. The trick isn't avoiding wood. The trick is knowing when to sand and seal and when to spend on stone. My work, in the precise light of the office and the sulfur glow of the shop floor and the muffled hush of headphones, is choosing wood or stone when the spreadsheet wants drywall. My mother's hands have gotten small and cool, like the world has narrowed to the finest version of itself. On Sundays, I drive her past the plant. She whistles under her breath. "Big," she says. I tell her about Priya's new fail-closed protocol and Becca's insistence on 2 signatures for vendor changes and Jonah's hinge. She nods, half listening. "Your father would like that boy," she says. "He liked people who could see with their hands." We get ice cream and sit in the car and eat it with the windows down. She tells me stories about a neighbor I don't remember that all end with the neighbor laughing and a mess on a kitchen table. I listen. I wipe away a drip from her wrist with a napkin. The light on late Sunday makes a church out of parking lots. There were women who moved through my life, like whether I wanted to name. Rachel called from Boston years later and said she'd built a house that looked clean enough to float. "You'll hate it," she said, laughing. No visible wires. Elena hung one of her storm photos over my kitchen table, a power line up close, humming, a sky like bruised sugar behind it. We tried moving in together and discovered that we needed walls more than we needed proximity. She lives 3 floors up now, on purpose. We have coffee at odd hours and say things like, "Are you good?" and mean it. Sometimes I think about Maya signing forms with her neat, calm signature and wonder which road her steady hand took her down after the city budget season ends. Once, after a council meeting, we got late-night pancakes at a place that smells of old sugar and hot metal. She shook cinnamon on her plate and said, "You breathe slower now." I said, "I count." She said, "You always counted. You just finally count the right things." There's a scene I replay when the numbers feel like the only terrain left. It's August, and the plant is humming, but not loudly. The doors are open. The battery closets are lined like books waiting to be read. I'm in steel-toed boots because I like not stubbing my life. The floor supervisor, a woman named Tess who wears her hair in a high knot and never pretends to hear you when she can't, calls me over. She says the guys from Bay for brought donuts, and they taste like someone still cares about cake. We all share the donuts over the rattled plastic table, and Carl tells a story about a forklift that lost a battle with a vending machine in '98, and for 15 minutes, I can't tell if I am building something or being built. When you have more money than your town knows what to do with, people come to you with needs and declarations, with righteous texts and quiet asks. I made a rule after the recall that we only fund apprenticeships and tools. No banners, I tell the people on our small foundation board. No names on bleachers. We buy toolkits and training and safety glasses that don't pinch. What I wanted as a kid wasn't a savior. I wanted someone to show me the right socket and be patient when I fumbled. We started a night class in a disused wing of the high school. The first night, a boy with a buzz cut and a girl with blue nails and 3 people whose days were already too full showed up with notebooks and a quiet I recognized. Priya taught a unit on maps. She drew a single line and said, "Every map lies a little. Your job is to know what it's lying about." The call that nearly broke me came from Becca at 2:14 a.m. In late spring, her voice uneven. "We have a cash mismatch," she said. "It's not embezzlement. It's us. We are spending future money in the present tense." She'd warned me in spreadsheets, and I'd nodded, and then thrown a lasso around a future I liked the look of. The wire at 4:52 a.m. Was me making good on years of wanting to pay later. After I hit confirm, I stood alone in that glass box and held my father's list like a compass you don't need until you're already lost. One by one I said them out loud. People who count on you, and you know their names. Doing a thing the right way when the wrong way is easier and no one is watching. Telling the truth when your stomach doesn't want to. Time with your mother when she's laughing. Tools that won't quit before you do. I taped it inside the cabinet that holds the bell we only ring when someone says, "I'll sign." It felt like making the room remember. There are days I wake into the sense that I'm living a life I borrowed. On those days I go where I can hear machines breathe, and I find someone doing one small thing well. Jonah, with his hinge, has a desk now and a budget, and still eats yogurt like he's in a hurry. He came by last week and showed me door drift maps that look like music. We can see a jam 6 minutes before jam now, sometimes 10, he said, bright, tired, proud. 6 minutes is forever, I said, and meant it. Sometimes Elena leaves a photo proof on my doormat, taped in brown paper, a habit she picked up from watching me avoid opening an envelope for years. I open those right away. The latest is of my hands. When did I allow someone to photograph my hands? They look like my father's if you squint and allow for different kinds of work. Less grease, more ink, same scars shaped like commas. You think money will change what you carry. It doesn't. It just hires better boxes. I keep a blue hoodie on the back of my chair and a small, cheap screwdriver in my pocket because I like the reassurance of taxes paid in aches. We still make mistakes, but they tend to be boring mistakes now, the kind that can be corrected with meetings and measures instead of apologies and flowers at the curb. We still tell each other cold numbers on bad days. We still write with thick markers when the room is scared. I still count breaths in elevators. The doors still open to floors that are there. On the last night of summer, I drove my mother past the lake. We rolled down the windows and the car filled with the smell of warm algae and gasoline and a distant campfire. She was quiet, then said, "You're not your money." I said, "I know." She said, "Good, because it'll leave before you do." She fell asleep with her head leaned against the seat, mouth slightly open, a sound like a small engine idling in the softest way. I pulled over and just sat there listening. I thought about a boy breathing too fast in a robotics room and a girl telling him to steady his hand, and a dispatcher at 2 in the morning saying my name like a friend, and a woman with a camera laughing in the rain, and a kid with a hinge making music out of almosts. In the mornings now, I wake before the sun and the city is a soft, blue question. I make coffee that tastes like the color of the inside of a walnut. I check the dashboards, but I don't let them decide my mood before my body does. I walk the floor, say names, learn small updates. I remember to ask who needs the better screwdriver. Once in a while, I find myself in that glass box again with the bell cabinet and the old list taped inside. I read it under my breath. It's not prayer. It's inventory. Then I go open doors that work and stand in doorways for a minute when they don't. And when someone asks me how we're doing, I give them the cold numbers first and save the story for when we've earned it. I took the brown paper envelope to my father's grave on a Tuesday, the kind of flat Midwestern day that feels like a promise not to surprise you. I placed it on the grass, opened, empty now, and I told him the things I'd learned. I told him tools have memories, and so do sons. I told him we were careful with hinges, that we try to see drift before drift maps into jam, that we buy good sockets and show them manners. I told him that when the wrong way is easier and no one is watching, I can feel his hand on my shoulder like a second weight that keeps me steady. The wind moved the grass like a patient hand smoothing a sheet. Somewhere far off, a truck shifted gears, and the sound traveled clean as a truth you can work with. When I leave the plant late, the highway is a long, breathing thing, and the world is mostly people trying not to drop what they promised to carry. I have an old pickup I keep just for the way it makes me drive like a person and not an owner. The radio plays a song I don't know the words to. The air smells like cut fields. I'm not done. We're not done. There are still doors that stick and maps that lie a little and young hands that need work to remember them. At red lights, I catch my reflection in the window. Older now, softer in the good ways, harder where it matters. The light turns. I go. I try to breathe slower. And the vehicle I built to carry other people's cargo carries me too, steady and humming, toward whatever is next with a noise like a promise made by someone who has learned, finally, to count the right things.